and feel free to share your screen when you want. But hey, everybody, thanks for coming. This is John Bennett of Renasant Bank. He's been in the banking industry for 25 years, and he has passion for helping out not just businesses that he works with, but also small businesses and entrepreneurs like yourself. So if we're just grateful to have him here, and we're really excited to hear what he has to say. So John, I'll hand it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Parker. And welcome, everybody. I hope that something I share today appeals to you and helps you in some way, because my passion is really working with business owners like yourself. And I've spent the last 25 years here in Nashville as a banker working with businesses in pretty much every stage you can think of, pretty much every industry. And I began to notice that there were certain things that the most successful business owners had in common with each other. And I want to share just a couple of those things. I'm going to pull up and share my screen here. So I'm going to go to that and just kind of talk you through what I've discovered on one side of the coin that I think will hopefully be something for you to take seriously and hopefully benefit from. And the title of my discussion today is Cash is King. And I'm going to talk about balancing liquidity and debt in the growth of your business. And these are two principles that I think go hand in hand, and something that every business owner should really think hard about, both before they go into business and certainly periodically through their business, to make sure they're keeping a good balance between these two items. So my overall advice to you is to stay high on cash and low on debt. And that may sound a little bit odd coming from a banker's point of view, because I'm the guy that lends millions of dollars every year to businesses and have been for a long, long time. But there is a smart way to borrow money. There's a good time, and there's wise reasons for borrowing money. So borrowing money can help you, and it can help you grow your business faster than other means. And it can be an inexpensive way a lot of times of growing your business and creating maximum profitability, but it also can come with consequences. Cash or liquidity, and I define liquidity as anything that's easily convertible into cash in a short period of time. It could be publicly traded stocks, mutual funds, cash value of life insurance, and of course, just good old hard cash that you have in a money market account or a savings account. But the couple of things with cash and debt is that cash gives you options. And as a business owner, you want all the options that you can get. You want to make sure that you have options to overcome challenges that you will face in your business on a periodic basis, and sometimes multiple times within your business career. Things like a downturn in revenue, a lowering of your profit for 6 months or a year. Maybe you hit some headwinds. Maybe it's something in the general economy. Maybe it's something related to your industry. And I'm going to talk in just a little bit about some more specifics of that. But cash gives you options to overcome challenges as a business. Now, debt or borrowing money, while it does give you options to grow your business and to reach profitability levels that you might not have been able to attain otherwise, it also can reduce some of your options. Debt becomes a fixed cost. And in banking, we just look at a fixed cost as anything that you have to pay on a monthly or quarterly or annual basis, no matter how successful your business is. For instance, if your revenue's up or down for the year, if your profitability is up or down, if there are headwinds in the economy, or if everything's smooth sailing, you still have these fixed costs. Well, debt is one of those. Employee salaries is one of those. Obviously taxes and maybe insurance on your building, equipment, et cetera. Those payments become due no matter how you're doing in your business cycle. So if you're having a great year or you're having a not so good year, that debt payment still comes obviously with principal and interest normally every month. Whereas if you're not selling as much, then your cost of goods sold is not as high. But on the debt side, it's something that's kind of there you have to live with for the term of that loan. So you want to make sure to take it on wisely, because it can reduce your options because you've got to make that debt payment every month. You may not have as many options to take advantage of other things in the marketplace, or to have as much liquidity for other reasons that you might need to infiltrate into your business, say in a downturn in revenue or in a challenge with your business. So I want to talk a little bit about just how do we get that liquidity? What's a good amount of liquidity that you should keep? And just some other important notes about liquidity overall. For those of you who are contemplating starting a business, you've got maybe an idea, you've been looking at a plan, or maybe you've developed a plan in good detail, but you haven't launched your business yet. You know, some of you may be a good while out before you're ready to launch that business. You're just kind of discovering exactly how you want to put this together. You're maybe trying to get the right equity partners or investors, et cetera, to pull this business together. Well, this is a perfect time for you to build liquidity while you're on your day job, as I call it. And hopefully your day job is something that's in the industry, at least, of the business that you're working on building, so that you can learn on a regular basis from the company that you're working with, things to do, things not to do, gaining that experience in that industry so that you'll have that experience to take with you when you start your own business. But while you're thinking and contemplating and continually refining your business plan, make sure that you are being conservative with your lifestyle and trying to save as much as you possibly can. Because even though you have your equity investors and maybe there's not a lot of startup costs to your particular business, maybe it's service oriented and you don't need a whole lot more than maybe a laptop and your cell phone, still, there are going to be times as you grow your business when liquidity can be tremendously advantageous. And a lot of having the right liquidity too is just, again, adjusting your lifestyle, living below your means, making sure that you put enough cash away on the front end so that you've got that liquid reserve, you've got that rainy day fund when things don't go maybe exactly as planned with your business. And I've worked with so many business owners that have had brilliant plans and people have saluted their plans. It just looked like, gosh, this is such a great concept. This is going to work so well. And maybe it did, but a lot of times the first 6 months, 9 months, even a year do not ramp up quite as quickly as they thought it would, as far as the revenue, as far as the profitability. And so in order to keep things moving forward, to keep paying your employees, to keep paying your lease, to keep paying your marketing budget, you've got to have funds from some source. And so that's where liquidity comes in. It can really save you and help you to survive for the long haul until your profit is up where it needs to be. And if you already have your business going, whether you're in the first year or the 10th year, and you look at your balance sheet and you don't have a lot of liquidity personally or in the business, then my advice to you is that you meet with your CFO, if you have a CFO or accounting department, if you have a company that large, or if it's a small company and maybe it's just you, meet with your CPA or meet with another business owner that you trust that's a non-competitor and work on together a plan and ask that person to hold you accountable with putting aside money from your business on a regular basis. Instead of spending all of your profit and pushing it out into salaries or bonuses for your owners, maybe you need to put some of that money toward liquidity. And same thing with your lifestyle. Instead of spending everything, put some into liquidity personally as well. And you will definitely be glad you did down the road. When I first moved to Nashville, I went to Belmont University and I got a degree in finance. And when I was graduating in the last part of my senior year, the chancellor at the time, Dr. Herbert Gabhart, was a very wise man. He was older in years, and he sat all the seniors down in a small auditorium there on the campus of Belmont, and he talked to us about life. And one of the things that he said that I've never forgotten is the 80-10-10 rule. He said, I want to tell you that no matter how much money, how much or how little you make coming out of Belmont and all through your career as it builds until you retire, if you will discipline yourself to live on 80% or less of your take-home pay, and you'll tithe or give at least 10%, and you'll save at least 10%, he said, you'll always have enough. And I have definitely found that to be true. I have applied that principle, and it has been very true throughout the course of my life. And the business owners that I've worked with, it was worked just the same. You know, it takes discipline to save. And each one of you who are on this webinar you've got to be a disciplined person, or you wouldn't be a business owner, or you wouldn't be putting together a business plan, because obviously it takes a tremendous amount of discipline to come in and continually perfect your business on a daily basis, to continually polish it, make it more profitable, figure out ways that you can reduce your cost, figure out ways that you can grow it, you can expand your market share. All of those things take a daily discipline. So liquidity is the same way. You just have to take that discipline and put it toward, how can I build liquidity on a systematic, regular basis? And it doesn't mean that you look at your balance sheet and say, oh gosh, I've got $5,000 in cash in my business, I've got to get some liquidity quick. It's that you just start a plan. You start every month figuring out, how much this month and this quarter can I put aside in the business and personally. Again, if you're starting a business and you haven't launched it yet, how much can you put aside personally on a regular basis? And some of you may need to develop in your business a 5-year plan, an 8-year plan, a 10-year plan, so that you don't, take too much out of your business, obviously on a regular basis, because you don't want to hurt the growth of your business and the viability of your business. But if you can find out how to eke out some of that profit on a regular basis and set it aside so that you've got it down the road when your business hits some turbulent times. And people ask me, well, how much liquidity should you normally have? Well, I would say your goal should be to have at least 6 months of operating expenses set aside in your business, and at least 6 months of living expenses set aside personally for you. And you say, well, gosh, John, that's a lot. That sounds like a whole lot of putting aside. And I'm the type person that I want to make profit, and I want to make an investment on everything that I have, whether it's personally or it's business income and profit. Well, I would just say to you that I agree with you that you want to invest as much as you can in the growth of your business and continually to make it more profitable. But if you don't take the time to set aside liquidity, when you hit headwinds in your business, and unless you're, a very, very small minority of a business owner, you will hit headwinds. Everybody I've worked with, I think in 25 years, has hit headwinds, some of them major, some of them over and over. And they've survived and gotten through them, a lot of times through their liquidity and through their discipline and borrowing. But you'll get those headwinds coming at you, and you want to make sure that you can make it through those times. So discipline to put aside these operating expenses and personal liquidity will make a difference for you. And you need to do that as early on as you can in your business. What I've seen is that people that don't put aside any liquidity, they end up paying several times more what they would have lost in investment by the cost to their business or to their personal financial life, because they didn't have liquidity. They either had to go out and borrow money and pay more interest on it, or get another equity investor and they lost a percentage of their business, or, some of them, worst case scenario, their business didn't survive. So liquidity is something that I would just definitely recommend to you on a high basis with high regard. And I want to just mention some scenarios just to think about. So let's just think about the last 1.5 to 2 years. No matter how good of a business leader you are, no matter how successful you are in your business, none of us saw a global pandemic coming. So in March, April, May of last year, for restaurant industries, restaurants getting shut down, for the music industry, tours stopping, coming to a halt, for hotels, people couldn't sell rooms, entertainment venues, nobody wanted to go and be in a group of people. And you think about movie theaters, nobody wanted to go to a movie theater for a while. So all of those businesses were hit with a headwind that didn't have anything to do with any mistakes that they made. It was just life. It was just something that hit. So in working with a lot of those business owners, we did the PPP loans through my bank at Renasant Bank for those customers that were our customers, and we did some for business owners that weren't our customers. And the PPP loans, or payment protection plan loans, that the SBA offered to business owners last year, it did help. And it got them another probably 2.5 to 3 months of revenue to keep them going, keep their employees paid. But if they didn't have liquidity, that wasn't enough to really turn the tide for them. So I worked with business owners that didn't have liquidity, that either had to close their business or that lost very, very valuable employees that they still haven't been able to get back because they went into a different industry or got into some other job opportunity. And so now they may be short staffed, so it's still costing them profitability. And then other businesses had to completely close because they had no plan B. And let's think about too, just with restaurants, for instance, if you ran a successful restaurant up until March of last year, and then COVID closed you down for a period of time, so you couldn't have any indoor dining. Let's say you owned a string of restaurants in Tennessee. Well, you've got to have time. Number one, you got to keep your employees on some kind of retainer so you don't lose those valuable employees when you're able to reopen. Number two, you've got to keep your marketing budget fed because you want to market to people and reinvent yourself, which takes a little bit of time. You may have to open up a lot more outdoor seating. Restaurants were obviously opening up drive-throughs. They were advertising their takeout menus. So many things that they had to do. For movie theaters, a lot of them started doing live streaming events for people to attend. They started showing UFC fights. They started showing championship boxing matches, also catering to groups and organizations and others that maybe businesses that wanted to show a particular movie when the COVID calmed down a little bit because so many people were streaming at home and didn't continue to frequent the movie theaters. So if you owned a string of 10 movie theaters in Tennessee, what are you going to do if you don't have some liquidity? You've got to have liquidity in those kind of situations to get you through those tough times. So rolling forward a little bit, let's look at what we're experiencing now and have been experiencing for a while now in the economy with the supply chain issues. I mean, those have wreaked havoc across the board with businesses. Let's think about just new car dealerships. What if you're an entrepreneur that you owned 3 new car dealerships in Tennessee? Would you ever have dreamed that you wouldn't be able to sell cars and have the profitability you've had in the last 5 years just because you couldn't get the cars in? You couldn't even get the inventory because of the computer chip shortage. So those are things, again, they have nothing to do with somebody making a mistake in the business. It's just life that happens. Think about if your business was down on 2nd Avenue and you woke up last Christmas and there was a bombing that destroyed your building, destroyed your equipment, maybe knocked out your computers, your file system, everything. And you've got to keep that business going, but you don't have any profit maybe coming at that time. Maybe it comes to a halt for a period of time. Or maybe you were one of the businesses that got hit with the tornadoes that we've had in Nashville. How do you survive something like that if you don't have some cushion, if you don't have a plan B and some liquidity? So that's why I stress it so much, because everybody has those things happen. And then there's also obviously things in the general global economy that can impact you. There's things in your industry that can impact you. Right now, as inflation continues to tick up, if that continues and gas and food prices continue to go through the roof, it may lead to a downturn in sales in your business for a period of time because people are having to allocate more of their income to just basic living expenses. They may have less to spend on your product or your service. So you've got to be able to weather those times. And I always tell business owners, it's not negative to look at reality. It's not negative to consider the challenges that may come up. You don't want to focus on those. You've got to be 100% confident in your business and your business idea. But you're a wise business owner if you realize some of the challenges that can come and you prepare for those. Because to me, that's a lot more positive viewpoint that you're saying, okay, I'm going to be prepared to hit some of these headwinds so I can go through them successfully because I want to have a successful long-term business and I don't want to get knocked off track early on or at any time in my business. As I think about liquidity, liquidity gives you endurance in a business. And I compare it to a boxer in a title fight. If you imagine yourself as a championship boxer and you're going into a title fight, obviously you're confident. You may be predicting you're going to knock the opponent out in the first round, and hopefully you do. But what if it takes you 12 rounds of long, hard fighting to get to a victory? What if it's not near as easy as you thought? You still get there, you still win the fight, but it takes you 12 rounds. Well, if you trained only enough to knock out an opponent in one round and it goes toward 12 rounds, that could turn the tide and you might end up losing that fight because you weren't conditioned for it. You weren't prepared for it. Well, it's the same way with liquidity. And let's say that you train an immense amount for a fight in this analogy, and you knock the opponent out in the first round. So let's say you build up a good bit of liquidity and you don't end up needing it. Well, that is fantastic. There's nothing wrong with having extra liquidity. But on the other side, if you need it and you don't have it, and you experience a lot of headwinds that affect your profitability at different times in your business, you'll be so thankful that you put away that liquidity. So I just want to challenge you, no matter what you've done so far, I want to challenge you to get a plan and make sure that you're putting aside some of that money that you're making either before you start your business or now that you've got a business rolling. Do it on a regular basis, because so many business owners last year going through COVID did not have a lot of hiccups. A lot of them took advantage of additional market share that I worked with because they had a lot of liquidity. They could take advantage of the situation. Some of their competitors got knocked out. Some of their competitors lost their marketing budget because they didn't have a lot of funds coming in, but the ones that had liquidity could take advantage of a downturn in an economic situation. So liquidity can give you a lot of valuable resources to help you through. So I want to switch over to the other side of the coin. I want to talk just a little bit about debt. And again, I'm a person that lends money on a daily basis to businesses. So I'm obviously in favor of borrowing money for the right reasons. And I know that so many businesses have to borrow to be able to expand and grow in the way that they want to. But there are right reasons, there's right timing, and there's right ways to do it. First of all, I just want to give you some advice from my side of the desk. If you are a new business owner or you're strategizing on building a business, my hope is that you don't borrow any money in the first 2 years. Now, you may have an equity partner that comes in and helps fund your business, but I'm talking about going to a bank or another lending institution and actually borrowing money. There's two reasons I would suggest you not to borrow money in the first 2 years. One is most banks and most lending institutions won't even lend to you anyway, because if this is your first business and you don't have at least an 18 to 24 month track record, the bank or the lending institution is not going to have a lot of confidence that you can pay them back because there's no track record to show that. So that's one reason to think about. And if you do end up getting a loan from a lending institution early in your business, it's probably going to be a pretty high interest rate loan because they're going to charge you more interest because it is a higher risk to them. So they're going to make more money. So it can be very expensive to your business. The second reason I advise you is just for your own good, because no matter how well thought out your business plan is, no matter how polished and pristine it may look, honestly, you don't really know that this business is going to be successful until you have taken it out on the tracks and run it through reality in our economy to see, is the demand there for my service or my product? Are the price points where people will pay this cost of what it's going to take for me to be profitable? Do I have the acumen to run a successful business? Am I able to keep my cost under control, to lead a group of people in unity and as employees and build this business? And can I continue to drive higher and higher revenue? You don't really know that as a first-time business owner until you've been out on the track. You don't know if your business is really economically viable. You know, you can look at it and get a lot of opinions on it, but until you get out there and start actually doing it, it's going to be hard to tell. So, and again, I don't mean this to come across as a negative, but I mean it to come across as a positive for you, because I want you to survive through any challenges that you have so you can be successful. But let's say if you get out there and you're running your business on the tracks and, 6 months to a year, things are not going like you planned. And maybe you drained out your liquidity that you had and you end up having to hit pause on your business and revamp the whole plan and maybe come back in a different direction or come back even with a totally different business. Let's say you have to shut down your business. Well, the last thing you want to do is add insult to injury. If you have to close a business in the first couple of years and you've taken out a decent amount of debt out there that now you're going to have to maybe even go to work for somebody else to pay back. You don't want to be in that situation. You want to make sure that you've tested out this business, that not only does the plan look good, but the execution of the plan looks great and it's yielding the profitability so that your business is sure to be a long-term sustainable enterprise. Because again, you don't want to get yourself over your head. And if you have to come into a business borrowing a good bit of money, a couple of things are probably going wrong. Number one, you probably haven't saved up enough yourself, or you and your partners have not saved up enough to be able to put toward the business. You don't have enough liquidity. Second thing is either maybe you don't have the right equity investors in your business. So those are things I would look at and fine tune, but I would never go to debt as an early option in your business. I think it's just much more wise and it's going to give you a better chance of success in the long term if you hold off at least those first couple of years before you start borrowing a lot of money. Second thing in debt, and maybe some wisdom that I would share with you is, as a business lender to small businesses and large businesses across the board, I suggest that businesses and business owners put down at least 20% in cash toward the purchase of any asset that they're going to finance. What I spend my time doing a lot is I finance buildings for businesses to own or occupy. I finance buildings for businesses that occupy maybe part of the building. Maybe they lease out part to other tenants and develop income that way. And some businesses just buy other investment property that they want to finance and lease it out. I also do a lot of financing for equipment, a lot of financing for commercial vehicles, and I do lines of credit, which I'll talk about in just a little bit. But when you go in to purchase an asset, a lot of banks will lend you up to 100% on new commercial vehicles or new equipment. But I would suggest, if at all possible, you put down at least 20%. And you say, well, why would you say that? As far as equipment and commercial vehicles go, in the normal course of the economy, those assets are going to depreciate fairly quickly. Now, I know right now vehicles are not depreciating as quickly as normal because of the supply chain, but when that corrects and gets back on a normal keel, you'll start to see that again, these vehicles and equipment too, they depreciate pretty rapidly. So you never want to be upside down on a loan. And by that, I mean you just owe more on the asset than it's really worth. Because again, preparing for issues that may come up, if you needed to liquidate an asset, you don't want to have to come out of pocket after you sell the asset and pay the rest of the loan down. Then looking over to the real estate side, if you buy an owner-occupied building, I would suggest you put at least 20% down. So again, you've got a cushion. And right now in Nashville, nobody probably ever thinks that real estate's ever going to go down because of what's happening both on the residential market and in the commercial side of real estate. But it has in the past, and it probably will again. So real estate can also go down. Again, you don't want to be upside down, but let's say too that something happens in your business and you need to sell your building for some reason. Well, you want to make sure that you don't have to come out of pocket for the real estate commissions. And normally it's customary for the seller to pay the buyer's title insurance. You don't want to have to come out of pocket for that. You want to make sure that you've got enough cushion again with that asset that if you did sell it, you could come out at least whole, and hopefully you come out with some residual profit from the sale of that asset. And then another reason is if you finance 100% of something, think of how much more interest you're paying. You may get away with not putting down as much, but it's costing you so much more because you're financing 100% of that amount versus 80% or a different amount. So it can really eat into the profitability of your business. I want to share just a way that we look as bankers at, is a business really ready to borrow money? And we call it just a debt service coverage ratio. And it's real easy to calculate. And this is something that I would suggest you calculate. If you're not used to borrowing money, I'd suggest you calculate it on your own for your business before you go into the bank or to a lender to request a loan. Excuse me. So the way you calculate this is you take the net operating income of the most recent year of your business, that annual income, annual net profit there that you make out of your business, and you divide that by the annual debt payments for your business. So if you don't have any loans and you're going to borrow money and it's going to cost you $10,000 a month to pay that loan back for your business, you take that $10,000, multiply it by 12, get your annual payment. If you've got other loans, obviously you add all those monthly payments up, multiply them by 12. Divide that into your net operating income or net profit for the most recent year of your business. And then you come up with a debt service coverage ratio. And every bank that I've worked at usually benchmarks a 1.25% debt service coverage ratio as a minimum on a commercial loan. And basically that says that you're giving you've got a 25% cushion of your net income or net profit over the cost of your debt. So again, that cushion, let's say that, if we've looked at the last 2 years of your financials, but you get this loan and revenues go down a little bit because of something happening in the economy, in your business, whatever it is. You want to make sure you've got a little bit of cushion so you can at least easily pay that debt payment every month. And that 1.25 again gives you that cushion that you can have for that process. On the next screen here, I want to show you the debt service coverage ratio that I look at the most is a global debt service coverage. And what that does, it takes into account the income and the debt of the business, but it also takes into account the personal income of the business owners and the personal debt of the business owners. So the way we calculate that, we take the net income, just like on the regular debt service, and we add into that the take-home income of every single owner of the business. So let's say if it's just you, then we're going to look at your salary, any officer compensation that you took out, any bonuses that you took out. We're going to add all that in there to the income figure. Because if you're familiar with a profit and loss statement or an income statement, the officer salaries and bonuses come out before that net income figure. So we're just adding that back in so that we get a global look at not only how much is the business making in net profit, but how much are you as the business owner. And also if you have co-owners with you, co-business owners, then we're going to add in their income as well. Then we're going to go down and divide that by the debt service or the annual debt payments of the business. And we're going to add in your debt payments as an individual business owner. So we're going to take your personal mortgage and we're going to take that monthly payment and we're going to divide it we're going to multiply it by 12. We're going to take, if you have a car payment, we're going to multiply that monthly payment by 12. If you have credit cards, if you have student loan payments, whatever personal debt you have, we're going to add that in there. And then we're going to still look to try to get a 1.25% or greater debt service coverage ratio. Again, giving you a 25% cushion in the business and in the personal. So I'll say a couple of things about this. On a small business in particularly, the financial situation and the financial setup of the business owner is so closely tied to the business and vice versa. The financial situation of the business is so closely tied to the business owner or owners. For instance, I've seen this a lot of times in my career. If a business starts to suffer, the cash flow goes down, profitability goes down, then the owner a lot of times has to chip in some personal liquidity or has to pull back on their officer compensation to be able to make the business continue to run. I've even seen business owners that maybe had to delay their salary for 6 months or a year during a really tough time because, again, they've got to keep that business viable. On the other side, if a business owner gets overextended, let's say they purchase a house that they really can't afford, or they've got a country club membership they really don't have any business getting, and they've got some kind of obligation, sometimes they'll start to pull more money out of that business, bonus out more to themselves, do more in an officer draw, and that will impact the business in a negative way because it doesn't have the cash flow to be as strong as it was. So keeping these things balanced and making sure that you've got a good ratio before you start borrowing money or borrowing more money is very, very important. The other thing is that the higher your debt service coverage ratio is, the less of a risk you are to a lending institution. So normally the better terms you're going to get. You might get a longer fixed rate term on your loan. You might get a longer amortization. You might get a better interest rate. All of those things are up for negotiation if your debt service coverage is really high. If it's 2, if it's 4, I mean, I've seen it at 10. The higher it is, the more solid you are as a business and business owner, and therefore the less risk to the bank. So you have more negotiating power. If you're at a 1.25 on the nose, or you're under a 1.25, or heaven help, if you're under a 1%, that means you're over leveraged completely, and it's going to be difficult for you to get that loan. So that's just a calculation you can look at yourself, just to give yourself an idea of whatever stage your business is. Do you need to take on any more money? Do you already have too much that you've borrowed? And is it a good time for you to start borrowing money? So when you're putting down that 20% on an asset that I suggested, I also suggest to keep yourself in a good, solid position that you keep at least 20% in liquidity personally of the amount that you borrow. So let me show you just a real easy calculation here using $1 million sales price. $1 million in Nashville certainly doesn't buy what it did a few years ago, but you can still get a small commercial building or small commercial condo for $1 million. So let's say you find that and you're going to buy that. So you've got a sales contract. Well, my suggestion is you put down at least 20%. So obviously that's 200,000. So that leaves you 800,000 that you're going to borrow from the bank. I also suggest that you take 20% of that 800,000, make sure you've got that much in liquidity set aside. Again, preferably in a cash account, but at least in publicly traded stocks, bonds, mutual funds, something that you could get your hands on pretty quickly and turn into cash if you were to need to. So 20% of 800,000 is 160,000. So I'm saying if you're going to buy a commercial building for $1 million and you really want to be in a solid position, I would suggest you have $360,000. And you say, well, John, gosh, that's ridiculous. I don't have anywhere close to that. Well, maybe it's not time to buy the building, but even if you don't have that, work towards getting it. Start that process where you're putting aside some money to build that liquidity. Here's why I suggest that. I've already talked about why I think you should put down 20% or more. Let me talk about why I think you should have 20% in liquidity of the amount you borrow. Because if you buy that building and you've got $800,000 of debt out there, again, what happens if you have a downturn in sales, you have a downturn in profitability? The last thing you want to be worried about is, can I service that debt? All of a sudden, I've got more pressure on my bottom line. Do I have enough to service that debt, or am I going to potentially be late on late payments, mess up my credit, mess up my track record with the bank? You don't want to do that. So if you've got liquidity, in a worst case scenario, you can just pull it out of there and make your payments until you can get your profitability back where it needs to be. Again, it gives you options. It gives you time. It gives you endurance, because you can take the time to fix what's going on with your business. Maybe you got to adjust your cost control. Maybe you've got to expand your revenues and increase your revenues to get more profitability. It gives you time to examine what's not working right in your business and not have to worry about the debt that you're having to service. Also, there's obviously things that come up, in particular with a commercial building. If you have to purchase a new roof, that can be tremendously expensive on a commercial building. If you've got to purchase a new HVAC, tremendously expensive. You want to make sure that you don't have to drain your business, but you've got liquidity to support that if you need it. Also, if you have purchased a building and you have tenants in that building, that maybe you're in it as your business and you have tenants in it, or maybe it's strictly a tenant building, you may have a tenant turnover at some point, and you've got to do tenant improvements that you have to pay for part of that to lure the tenant into your business. Well, that's got to come from somewhere. So you'd rather have that from liquidity than having to drain it from the profitability of your business. Same thing with your own building. If you have a 100% owner occupied building, you're obviously going to want to continue to improve the look of that building just for the morale of your employees. And if you have a customer facing business, you're going to want to make sure that your business building looks sharp on a regular basis, and maybe you continually keep it modern, et cetera. So you're going to need some funds to be able to do that. So liquidity, again, keeps you from having to scramble, and it gives you what I call scrambling power. It gives you the ability to be able to maneuver when things don't go again exactly as planned. So again, look at it as a positive, not as a negative. Not, well, gosh, I'm going to prepare that the sky's going to fall. But no, it's like, I'm so prepared that if the sky does fall some, I'm going to be able to deal with it and overcome it. That's the kind of business owner I want everybody on this call to be. That's the kind of business owner I admire. And it takes a lot of discipline in the areas of liquidity and in the areas of borrowing to be able to accomplish that. So I want to spend just a minute too talking about lines of credit. For those of you who have not used those before, it can be a very helpful way to accentuate the profitability and the growth of your business and help you through, especially if you have some seasonal needs with your business. Let's take, for instance, if you are a business that has a really high dollar amount of sales in the holiday months of November, December, Thanksgiving, and Christmas, you're selling a tremendous amount of inventory, or your services are in very high demand. But let's say rolling into January and February, there's a downturn. You know, people have already spent their money. They're not as interested in your products or your services, and you don't have a lot of sales until maybe the spring promotions come out or spring needs for your service in March, April, May. Well, a line of credit can be a perfect solution for that scenario. Basically, you get approved for a certain limit on the line of credit. It's usually out there for a year. It's usually annually renewable with most banks. And you can draw up on that line of credit, say in this instance, in January, February. You can restock your inventory, restock your materials if you provide certain services. You can continue to pay your marketing budget, pay your employees while you're not making a lot of profit those 2 months. And then the objective is when you start getting more profit from March, April, May, that you take that profit and pay that line of credit back down. What you don't want to do is draw up a line of credit and leave it up there for an extended period of time. That's called an evergreen line of credit, and that's not something your banker is going to be happy with, and not something you should be happy with either as a business owner, because you want to make sure that you're using that line of credit in a proper way. So you want to have it up and down, where you draw it up when you need it, pay it back down the next few months from the profit that you realize from everything from the inventory, materials, et cetera, that you purchase with the line of credit. I would suggest too that you start out with a fairly small line of credit, because you want to make sure you get used to paying that line of credit down, make sure you're using it in the right way. If you max out a line of credit, you want to term it out and pay it off in principal and interest payments as well, because you want to make sure that you're not paying a tremendous amount of interest on that debt. If you max out the line and you're paying interest on 100% of that line, it's very expensive to your business. And I'll say also, if you max out a line of credit and you're not able to pay it down like you should be with the regular payments of the line of credit, and it's not revolving up and down, you need to take a close, honest look at what's going on in your business, because it looks like you may be needing a cash infusion or a capital injection into your business. In other words, your business may not be strong enough or profitable enough to run on its own without that amount of cash injection into your business from that line of credit. So you need to take a close look at your profitability, your sales, look at your cost control, and figure out what's going on, because you don't want that to continue, obviously, or that could be a very, very negative direction for your business. In the Bible, Proverbs 22:7 says the borrower is slave to the lender. And I take that word slave really seriously, because as a lender, I have seen where some borrowers have gotten to where it's almost like a slave scenario, where they have overextended themselves in their business or their personal finances, and therefore the bank has all of the control. And sometimes, the banks try to work with people as best they can, but sometimes the options aren't real pretty. And as a business owner, obviously the reason you went into business, one of the reasons is you wanted to run your own show. You didn't want somebody else telling you how to do everything. Well, how would you like it if a lender all of a sudden has all the control and can tell you everything you've got to do because they want their money paid back? Well, for that very reason, you don't want to get over your head in debt. You want to make sure that the lender, is coming to you saying, gosh, what else can I do for you? Because you're doing such a great job at managing everything within your business and your personal finances. So a proper amount of leverage for the right reasons is a very useful tool for growing a competitive business enterprise. But my suggestion is proceed with caution. And again, you're hearing this from a guy who lends millions of dollars to businesses every year. So I feel like I've got a good viewpoint to say this to you. Be cautious, because it's a great way to grow your business, but I don't want to see you get overextended and pay a horrible price for that, either personally or with your business. Too much leverage for the wrong reasons can get you into a danger zone. So think it through, make sure you get the advice of your CPA, your banker, and make sure you get a banker, by the way, that's really vested in your business and not just trying to expand their portfolio, that they do what's really best for your business. And I just want to wrap it up with this comment. Aggressive levels of debt, both personally and or commercially, coupled with minimal to no liquidity, has been a tragic end to more great business ideas and plans than anything else I've seen or anything else I know. I wrote a book back in August, or released a book back in August of this year, and I'm going to show you that here in just a second. But this talk comes out of one of those chapters because it's such an important piece. You got to be able to manage your liquidity and your debt side to run everything else on your business. And this is probably not the fun side of being in business, but it's a necessary side, because if you can take care of the financial side of things, obviously it can free you up to do what you love to do, and can free you up to do the things that you went into business for in the first place. But you've got to take care of those sides. Speaking of my book, it's called Build It Right, and the subtitle is Wisdom for Business Owners and Those Who Want to Be. And this book just came out of all the years that I've worked with business owners. I've had people ask me different things for advice at different times. And I thought, I've learned so much from being on this side of the table and working with business owners, and then also having a bird's eye view into the financials of these businesses, so I could see how these decisions that the business owners made affected them the next quarter, the next year in their financials. Did it work? Did it not work? Was it crippling to the business? Did it just blow the roof off in sales? What happened with that? So I found 10 things that I felt like were really in common with all of the most successful business owners that I've worked with in the last 25 years. And so I made 10 chapters in the book, Build It Right. If you have interest in that, you can pick it up online at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or Target. And would love for you to check that out. And just wanted to, again, thank you for your time. And I'm going to turn it over here in just a second to Parker as far as questions and answer for anybody that has any questions. And I'll be glad to field any questions on what I've talked about today. And if there's other topics about your business that you've wanted to ask a banker, feel free to fire ahead. I'll do the best I can to answer your questions and give you at least the wisdom and advice that I would share with you. But I really do appreciate the time. And I hope that something I've said has triggered you to think maybe a little bit differently, think from a different angle, because my goal is for you to have a tremendously successful business. I have a passion for helping people like yourself. And I hope that you've gotten something out of this. If I can ever help you in any way, you can always check me out on LinkedIn. But I really would love to know that something I've said has benefited you. So I'll turn it over now to Parker. And Parker, I'll let you set up the question and answer however you'd like.
Yeah, so y'all can feel free to unmute and ask if you want, but I know Jack does have one question right here that he put in the chat. He said, you said 80-10-10. Can you explain a little bit more about the 10 to give?
Yeah, okay. So, I come at that from a Christian perspective in the tithe. It's one of the things in the Bible that talks about tithing. No matter what your faith is, if you can give to other people through your success, it is going to give you great joy and pleasure. And I think that's one of the things that we all work for. I think everybody loves giving back. I mean, one reason I'm doing this talk is I hope that I can help each one of you. So if you are fortunate to make a good profit in your business or make a good profit from your income, it is a joy, I think, as a human being to be able to give back in some regard. And it helps you also, I think, to realize that you're successful and that, you've got it so much better than other people. I know every time I give in some way to a ministry or to someone else that's less fortunate, it's like this, the Bible says in this too, it's better to more blessed to give than to receive. Well, I get more out of it than that other person. And to me, that's one of the joys of a business owner. some of the most successful business owners that I've worked with have gotten, I would say, a huge amount of joy out of not only having a fine house and a very successful business and a great bank account, but they've gotten so much joy out of giving to other people. So I feel like that's a part of the process. You could say, well, I'm just going to live on less than I make and save as much as I can for myself. But that can be kind of empty. When you go to the top in your business, it's kind of nice to take other people with you. And if you can use that profit, and you see this with the multi-billionaires, that have made it popular over the last few years to give to other people. But I think it's a real joy as a business owner if you can help other people. And if you're fortunate enough to do really well in your business, it's just one of the greatest joys that you can have, I think, to take that 10%. And some people give a lot more than that. But, if you're really successful, you're probably making a lot more money than you really have to have. So that's my thought on that. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it did. And then, Wanda, I don't believe John is an advisor at the EC, but I'll be talking with him about that afterwards, see what we can maybe do on that one.
Awesome.
And she's also appreciative about looking at her ROIs for her funds and putting that into her company. So it's been grateful. She's grateful for that. Does
Good.
anybody else have any other questions? Rhonda, you have a question? Hello, Rhonda.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, I was on mute. How did you know I had a question?
I saw you unmute yourself. I just have the eye of a hawk, me. No, I'm
kidding. Oh, yeah, you're good. Really great presentation. So happy that you had this. I have a question.
Thank you.
I have two, really. Is there a point in time where my personal financial history will not be taken in consideration when applying for financing for the business? That's the first one.
Okay, let me hit that one first. It will be rare as a small business owner. Most banks will require the guarantee of the business owners on any kind of small business loan, and that's up to, in the multi-millions. Most of the companies that we don't require to have any personal guarantees are publicly traded companies, or they have to be pretty doggone huge and extremely successful, because on a small business, and I'm talking anywhere from, $100,000 in revenue to, 75, 100 million in revenue, so much of the success of that business is tied to you as the business owner. So most bankers like myself are going to want to say, hey, Rhonda, I believe in this business as long as you're running it, but I don't want to do a loan if you're not running it. So I want you tied to that loan. So therefore, I'm going to look at your personal financial history and situation. I'm going to look at your personal credit report and all as well, because I want to make sure that I've got you tied to that business. If you sold that business to XYZ person or company, I may not have as much confidence in how they run that business as I do how you run it. So it's not just the financials, it's that you're running it and you're the one that's produced the track record that I'm looking at. So therefore, we're normally going to tie you to that business personally, and therefore look at your personal financial statement. We'll look at your history and your tax returns, your personal credit report, all that. So I would say you'd have to get really, really large to where you would separate yourself from that. Now, you can always bring in additional guarantors for your business. And, if there's enough strength in those guarantors, we can a lot of times pull people, away from the business to guarantee it that may be other owners. But most banks are going to require, if you own 20% or more of a business and it's up for a business loan, they're going to require that business be guaranteed by you. And one of the simple reasons is, if we do a loan for a business, and let's say you own 20% or more of that business and you didn't sign on anything with that loan, technically you could come back and sue the bank and say, wait a minute, I own 20% of that business. I did not give any permission whatsoever for that business to be put up for this loan. And then we've got a huge legal debacle. So it's very difficult as a small business owner to totally separate yourself from the financial side of that business.
Great. The other question was, how should I look at leasing, I run my business very lean, very, very lean. So I tend to be more cash heavy. So because of that, I am not looking to buy, and I need like we're looking for a work truck, but I don't even want to buy that. I'm looking more at leasing and rental. So should I have 20% liquidity of the value of the lease, or what my total payments would be, or do you not care about that if you were on the other side?
On the lease side, I would just make sure that you've got the liquidity to service the lease. I don't think you need to have a certain amount to put down or anything like that, because if you're doing a capital lease with a dollar buyout, it is done like a loan. So you would technically own that equipment at the end of the lease. But you may not, you could put down money on that if you do a capital lease. If you're doing what's called an operating lease, you're just leasing it. The other company still owns it, that's leasing it to you. So obviously there would be no need in that regard to put down any money on it. But as far as the liquidity, I do think I would get as much liquidity as you can, pushing toward that 20% for the same reasons as the loan, because you don't want to default on that lease. You want to make sure that if you did have a downturn, you've got enough liquidity to be able to service that lease. But I do think it's wise to lease to begin with, whether it's leasing a facility, leasing a truck, leasing equipment. If you can start out leasing, again, I don't know how long you've had your business in operation, but I would lease on the front end if you're early in your business until you've really demonstrated to yourself in the marketplace that you've got that track record before you take on that loan, because it's a lot easier usually to break a lease and pay some extra fees on that than it is to default on a loan. And it can hit your credit history a lot harder on the loan side. So I think you're wise to consider the lease. I would still look, pretty heavily at the liquidity though, just so you can make sure that you can service that lease, develop a good track record. So you've got that credit line from that lease in your favor as a business owner. And if you do decide to buy equipment, trucks, building, whatever down the road, you've got that as a reference.
But are you saying have 20% of what my total lease payments would be, or do I put that in the 6-month coverage bucket?
I would look at it more as 6 months coverage. I would make that my goal, to have 6 months of lease payments that you've got, any other operating expenses that you have together. I would at least make it a goal to try to get as close to that 6 months as you can. And again, it gives you plenty of time to maneuver. If something unexpected happens with your business, you've got some scrambling power. You've got some thinking time to revamp before you have to worry about, oh gosh, can I make this lease payment?
Thank you.
Does that make sense? Did that answer your question?
Yes. This is great. This is awesome.
Well, thank you. I am very glad it's helpful.
Anybody else have any questions? Feel free to unmute or drop in the chat.
Okay, well, if no one else has any more questions, I have another one. How important is my DUNS number, and do you guys on the other end of the bank really care about it?
When you say DUNS number, you're Dun and Bradstreet?
Yes. I have one. I have no idea if you care. I care. I don't know. We pull that mainly on the larger transactions. We'll pull that. I don't usually look at it a whole lot on a really small business. I'm more concerned about your personal credit. I'm more concerned about the demonstrated cash flow on the business. But certainly, the Dun & Bradstreet does give us a peek into how you're paying your suppliers, other vendors, et cetera. And if there's issues there, that's obviously not good. If you're paying everybody on time, that's great. But so much of that a lot of times shows up in a personal credit report anyway, not necessarily the business side, but usually most people, if they're not handling their business trade accounts well, they're not handling their personal credit well either. So I wouldn't say it's tremendously important, but it is something we look at. And particularly if it's a larger loan, our credit analyst will pull that, at least look through it, make sure there's no major issues that we need to know about. But it's certainly important, I think, to keep that up to date and make sure that there's no inaccurate information on there, and obviously make sure that you're paying your vendors and all of your trade lines on a timely basis, because as you do grow your business, that Dun & Bradstreet may become more and more popular, more and more important.
And it may be a determining factor if you get larger and larger loans with certain banks. But most small businesses I work with, they don't normally spend a whole lot of time on that, other than just to make sure that obviously it's accurate. You might want to get it pulled every so often, make sure that nothing's reported late that wasn't late, that you've got the right trade accounts on there, et cetera.
Thank
All
you.
right.
You're welcome.
Well, we are at time right now. So John, thank you so much. I appreciate you speaking, and hopefully we can have you again sometime, hopefully in person sometime next year.
Yes, I would love that. Thank you, Parker. And thank you to everybody. Really appreciate the time, and hope it was helpful. Hope you guys have a great rest of the week.
All right. Thanks,
You
John.
too. Thank you.
Bye, all.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.